What if the person you believe yourself to be is nothing more than an illusion? Carl Jung proposed that your authentic self, your very soul, lies buried in the depths of your unconscious, concealed behind masks you've unknowingly crafted. To uncover it, you must embark on an inward journey, facing your deepest fears, harmonizing the masculine and feminine energies within, and dismantling the false identity you've clung to. In this exploration, we'll unravel Jung's guide to discovering the soul and reveal how to reclaim the lost fragments of your true self. So, what does it mean to become whole? According to Carl Jung, individuation is the process of doing exactly that, becoming a complete person, integrated and unified in every aspect of your being. But this isn't a simple or quick journey. Jung described individuation as a lifelong process, one that demands you confront parts of yourself you may not even know exist. Individuation is the process of becoming a whole person. Think of it as a journey toward uniting the many facets of your personality: your conscious mind, your unconscious desires, your rational thoughts, your emotional instincts, and even your shadow, the parts of yourself you might not want to acknowledge. Jung believed that all of these parts must be integrated for you to achieve psychological wholeness. Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Individuation is exactly this, becoming the truest version of yourself, one that is not fragmented but complete. This process doesn't involve eliminating parts of who you are, but rather embracing them. It's about recognizing and reconciling the contradictions within you, your light and your shadow, your strengths and your weaknesses. What makes individuation so challenging is that it requires us to integrate all aspects of our personality, even those we'd rather ignore. Jung called the parts of ourselves we suppress or deny the shadow. The shadow is made up of all the things we hide from the world, and sometimes from ourselves: our fears, insecurities, impulses, and weaknesses. Jung believed that integrating the shadow is a crucial part of becoming whole. He said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." In other words, we can't simply focus on the positive or comfortable aspects of ourselves. To truly grow, we must confront and accept the darker, more difficult parts of our nature. This process is not about judgment or shame. Instead, it's about understanding that all parts of you have value and serve a purpose. By integrating them, you gain a deeper sense of self-awareness and balance. You become a more authentic version of yourself, no longer hiding or rejecting parts of who you are. Individuation is not something that happens overnight. It's not a goal you can check off a list or a destination you reach at a specific point in life. Jung believed that individuation is a lifelong journey. Each stage of life offers new opportunities for growth, new challenges to face, and new aspects of yourself to integrate. This ongoing process of individuation often begins with a crisis or turning point, moments when the old ways of living no longer seem to work. Jung believed that these moments, rather than being setbacks, are actually openings to deeper self-discovery. It's in these periods of uncertainty and discomfort that we are forced to confront parts of ourselves we've long ignored. Individuation is not about becoming perfect or reaching a final state of enlightenment. It's about becoming whole, embracing all aspects of your humanity, and continuing to grow and evolve throughout your life. Individuation begins with understanding the persona. In Jungian psychology, the persona is the mask we present to the outside world. It's the public face we show to others, our social roles, behaviors, and appearances. While it's necessary for functioning in society, the persona can become problematic when it strays too far from our authentic self. The persona represents how we want to be seen by others. It's the version of ourselves that fits into social expectations, our professional demeanor, how we behave around friends, or the way we present ourselves in different situations. Jung saw the persona as essential for navigating life, but he also warned that we must be careful not to confuse the persona with our true identity. As he wrote, "The persona is that which in reality one is not, but which oneself as well as others think one is." In other words, the persona is a social mask that may hide who we really are. We all adopt different personas depending on the setting, how we behave at work versus with friends, or how we act in public versus when we're alone. This is a natural part of interacting with society. However, problems arise when we over-identify with the persona, leading to a disconnection from our inner self. This happens when we suppress parts of ourselves that don't align with the mask we wear. We may hide our vulnerabilities, suppress our true emotions, or conform to social norms just to be accepted. The more we suppress, the more distant we become from our true identity. Jung warned that over-reliance on the persona can lead to a fractured sense of self. When we become too attached to the roles we play or the image we project, we lose touch with our inner world. This can create inner tension as the persona becomes a barrier between our true self and the world. He emphasized, "The world will ask you who you are, and if you do not know, the world will tell you." The more we wear the mask, the harder it becomes to recognize what's underneath. To achieve individuation, we must acknowledge the persona for what it is, a useful mask but not the core of who we are. The goal is not to eliminate the persona, but to recognize its limitations. We need it to function in society, but we must also learn to peel it away when necessary and reconnect with our authentic self. It's about finding a balance between the mask we wear for the world and the person we truly are underneath. Individuation also requires facing the shadow. Every person carries a shadow. It's the part of us that we often try to hide, suppress, or deny. According to Jung, the shadow is the dark side of our personality, the part that remains buried deep within our unconscious mind. While we may not always be aware of it, the shadow influences our behavior, decisions, and emotions in profound ways. At its core, the shadow represents everything we reject or ignore about ourselves. It's the unconscious mind filled with thoughts, feelings, and traits that we don't want to face. These could be qualities that society deems unacceptable, such as anger, jealousy, or greed. Jung believed that because we don't consciously acknowledge these parts of ourselves, they live in the unconscious. But just because we repress these feelings doesn't mean they disappear. Instead, they influence us in subtle and sometimes destructive ways. As Jung said, everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. In other words, the more we ignore our shadow, the more power it has over us. Acknowledging the shadow is the first step toward becoming more self-aware and ultimately more whole. The shadow is composed of all the thoughts and feelings we push aside, our insecurities, our flaws, our weaknesses. But it's not just negative traits that get repressed. Sometimes the shadow contains positive qualities that we've suppressed because they don't fit with how we want to be perceived. For example, a person who values being logical might suppress their creativity or emotions because they believe it doesn't align with their rational identity. Jung believed that these repressed thoughts and feelings don't just sit dormant in the unconscious. Instead, they surface in indirect ways, often through behaviors we don't fully understand. This is why we sometimes react in ways that seem out of character or over the top. These reactions are signals that parts of our shadow are coming to the surface. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate, Jung said. This means that until we acknowledge our shadow, it will continue to influence our actions without us realizing it. Recognizing these repressed elements of ourselves allows us to take back control and live more intentionally. Jung also emphasized that the shadow is not inherently evil, though it can be a source of both darkness and light. While it often contains traits that are considered negative or undesirable, it can also be a source of immense creativity, passion, and strength. The energy contained within the shadow, when properly integrated, can fuel personal growth and transformation. Jung once explained that the shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality, for no one can become conscious of the shadow without considerable moral effort. By facing our shadow, we confront not only our capacity for harm, but also our potential for greatness. This is why Jung saw the shadow as a dual force. It can manifest in both destructive and constructive ways. When the shadow remains unacknowledged, it can lead to negative consequences, such as projecting our unresolved issues onto others. However, when we confront and integrate the shadow, it becomes a source of inner power and balance. Accepting our shadow means accepting the full spectrum of who we are, both the light and the dark. Jung further emphasized that to achieve wholeness, we must also embrace the Anima and Animus. Within each of us lies a reflection of the opposite gender, what Carl Jung called the Anima and Animus. These are powerful forces embedded in our psyche, representing the feminine side within men and the masculine side within women. According to Jung, these elements are essential for achieving psychological balance and wholeness. Just as important as integrating the shadow, the anima represents the feminine aspect of a man's unconscious mind. It's more than just societal ideas of femininity. It embodies qualities like emotion, intuition, empathy, and creativity. Jung believed that for men to become whole, they must confront and integrate their anima. In doing so, they allow themselves to access parts of their psyche that would otherwise remain unexplored, often those related to deeper emotional connections and intuitive understanding. Jung explained, "The anima is the archetype of life itself. It's the gateway to a man's unconscious, and integrating the anima helps him develop a more well-rounded and complete personality. Without acknowledging the anima, a man may suppress or reject parts of his emotional world, leading to an unbalanced and rigid self-image. In women, the animus represents the masculine side of the unconscious. This archetype encompasses qualities like logic, assertiveness, strength, and rationality. While these traits may appear outwardly masculine, Jung argued that for a woman to become psychologically whole, she must integrate her animus and access these inner strengths. Jung said, "The animus is the deposit, as it were, of all woman's ancestral experiences of man. And not only that, he is also a creative source. Just as the anima connects men to the deeper emotional layers of their psyche, the animus connects women to a wellspring of rationality and inner power. Integrating the animus doesn't mean becoming cold or overly rational. Instead, it offers women a sense of inner strength and confidence that balances their emotional and intuitive nature. When these masculine traits are embraced rather than repressed, they provide a foundation for self-expression and action in the world." Jung believed that the anima and animus are not just opposites to be balanced, but rather complementary forces within the human psyche. He emphasized that both are essential for wholeness. To become truly complete, a person must embrace both the masculine and feminine aspects within themselves, regardless of gender. This process is a part of individuation, the journey toward becoming the truest version of oneself. Jung famously said, "Wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the contraries." This means we cannot simply reject the anima or animus as unnecessary. Both are integral to a well-rounded and balanced personality. In men, the feminine qualities of the anima bring emotional depth, empathy, and creativity. In women, the animus offers rationality, inner strength, and assertiveness. Together, they guide us toward a more complete understanding of ourselves and our place in the world. When the anima and animus are integrated, they help us transcend rigid gender roles and cultural expectations, allowing us to tap into the full spectrum of human potential. It's about bringing harmony between the masculine and feminine, balancing the rational and emotional, and embracing all the qualities that make us human. When we integrate the shadow, persona, anima, and animus, we move closer to the ultimate goal of individuation, the self. The self represents the complete, authentic harmony of all aspects of who we are. At the core of Carl Jung's theory of individuation lies the self, the true, authentic self that encompasses the entirety of who we are. It represents the final stage of personal development, where all the different aspects of our personality come together in harmony. This is not just about becoming a better version of ourselves, but about becoming the most complete, whole version. Jung saw the self as the ultimate goal of individuation, the process of psychological integration. The self, in Jungian terms, is not simply who we are in the present moment. It is the totality of our being, including the conscious and unconscious aspects of our mind. It is our deepest, most authentic self, the part of us that remains after we've peeled away the layers of societal expectations, ego defenses, and superficial identities. As Jung put it, the self is not only the center, but also the whole circumference, which embraces both conscious and unconscious. It is the center of this totality, just as the ego is the center of consciousness. The self is the most profound aspect of our identity, representing our fullest potential as human beings. Achieving connection with the self means becoming who you truly are, independent of external validation, projections, or masks we often wear in daily life. It's about accepting every part of ourselves, the good and the bad, the light and the shadow, and uniting them into a cohesive, authentic whole. The self is more than just a static identity. It is the dynamic intersection of all the various aspects of who we are. This includes not only the conscious aspects of our personality, our values, beliefs, and behaviors, but also the unconscious parts, like the shadow, the Anima, or Animus, and other archetypal energies. Jung described this process as one where the different parts of the personality become harmonized. Individuation, the journey toward the self, requires us to confront and integrate these various parts, even the ones we may initially resist or fear. It's through this process of integration that we become whole. The self acts as the organizing principle that brings unity to the diversity of our psyche. Instead of seeing ourselves as fragmented or conflicted, individuation allows us to recognize that every part of us, our rational mind, emotions, unconscious desires, and even our darker impulses, can coexist in balance. It's the acceptance of these contradictions and the ability to reconcile them that leads to a fuller, more authentic life. The self represents the state of being fully realized. To achieve this state, we must embrace the totality of our existence, including the parts of ourselves we'd rather avoid. This is not about perfection, but about completion, about becoming the most integrated and authentic version of ourselves. Jung believed that this process of self-realization is not just psychological, but also spiritual, as it involves connecting to something greater than our individual ego. Jung wrote, "Individuation is the process by which a person becomes a psychological individual, that is, a separate, indivisible unity or whole. This wholeness is the ultimate goal of individuation. It's the point where we transcend the narrow confines of the ego and experience the unity of all parts of ourselves, bringing us closer to our true essence. While achieving the self is a lifelong journey, every step we take toward it brings us closer to true fulfillment." Jung viewed this state as a kind of psychological enlightenment, where we are no longer ruled by unconscious forces, but instead live in harmony with all aspects of our being. It's a state where we no longer seek external validation because we have found our inner center, the self.